Welcome to Stats and Scheme. I am Shawn Syed, joined as always by my good friend Seth. We made it all the way through the season, through all 337 pages of our Google Doc. Kansas City Chiefs, Super Bowl champions again. We're going to go through the game. We're going to talk through some situations. We're going to talk through some film. But first, how was your Super Bowl Sunday?
It was good. I thought that first half obviously was a little bit slow. Good halftime show, despite what some people would tell you on Twitter. Good halftime show. And then it really went into a very intense second half, very intense overtime. Obviously, we talked through every single angle possible the entire 2 weeks leading up to the Super Bowl. It really just came down to fumble luck, special teams, like stuff that we didn't really talk about that much, which is kind of funny. But I definitely enjoyed the Super Bowl Sunday. How about you? How did you feel about the way that the day went?
Yeah, it was great. I'm excited for us to get. I know the person that you obliquely were mentioning to is gonna hit us up in the group chat. I'm excited to talk through that one, particularly on the halftime show takes. But yeah, just a fun game. Even I was having the time of my life through the first half as well, even through some defensive struggles. So just an awesome game to go through. Tage, let's start on the Kansas City defense versus San Francisco offense side. I think this is what we were both really excited to see throughout the game and going into this matchup. I don't think it disappointed. I mean, Kansas City's players played just above even what we could really expect. When you see like Leo Chanel and Mike Pennell making plays, and you see L'Jarius Sneed getting involved in the backfield, and I think he was like taking on Trent Williams on a play, and we obviously can't say enough about Trent McDuffie in that slot role being a real, just true game changer when pressuring, and then also being able to lock down in certain situations man to man. For San Francisco live, I was like feeling a little bit uneasy about the play calls. I think when I rewatched the film, I was largely fine with what the game was called by Shanahan. I know that the rushing success rate number was good. I thought he did actually get to a few different runs where we talked about it like a counter solid concept where it's counter, but really it's like a fullback and a tight end or your pullers there. He got to it in a bit of a different way in this game than he had throughout the season. They got to some of their like crack toss where you get that tackle pulling into space. They got to that a little bit later. Maybe would like to see that a little bit earlier, but Kansas City, I thought very much was throwing out just different fronts, load up that box and really challenging the receivers. And you get multiple plays or multiple clips of players just winning against blocks that I guess I wasn't really expecting. I thought Spags did a great job holding some of those blitzes for just a little bit later in the game. And, you go through those first 4 possessions, San Francisco is only able to get 3 points out of there. So that was pretty tough. I thought Purdy, he played well at points. I think you see both sides of that a little bit. He escaped pretty well. I thought he missed a few of those throws to Deebo Samuel. We'll talk about that. It's going to be really interesting to see, is there an evolution in that pass game or what kind of happens there? I think if someone says they pass too much, yeah, maybe, but Kansas City, as I said, they really stuff those box up a lot, mess with those double teams, and you just win enough to cause those issues. It felt like from a game plan perspective, like of any other teams, probably most similar to the Browns, where stuff the box, bring those different fronts, create interior pressure, and if you have the guys to hold up on the outside, you can do that. So that's kind of my lead in there. Tej, why don't you talk to us a little bit about San Francisco offense versus Kansas City defense?
Yeah, I mean, you touched on so many points there that I want to talk about. So let's go one by one here. First thing that you mentioned at the end there, which I think it was a really important point for me, was the blueprint that Jim Schwartz gave Steve Spagnuolo in this game. And I think Spags had the players to execute what the Browns were able to do all the way back in week 6 when the 49ers had their lowest success rate of the season was that week 6 game against the Browns. Spagnuolo was able to emulate parts of that in this game. You start with the rate at which the Chiefs defense played cover 1 in this game. So the Browns played cover 1 61.3% of the time all the way back in week 6. The Chiefs played that 40.5% of the time, which was the second highest rate that the 49ers offense had seen the entire season. You also look at the cover 0 that was being played. The Browns played that about 10% of the time back in week 6. The Chiefs played that 21% of the time in this game. And then you look at just the overall man coverage rate, which is what cover 0, cover 1 falls into. The Browns played that at a season high against the 49ers offense 71% of the time. The Chiefs were able to get that at 64% of the time in this game, which was, again, the second highest rate that the 49ers saw all year. So when you had players like Trent McDuffie on Deebo Samuel, like L'Jarius Sneed on Brandon Ayuk, that really forced the 49ers to have to go to some of their secondary receiving options, like Juwan Jennings, like Ray McLeod. And our friend Arjun Menon mentioned on Twitter that Trent McDuffie's primary matchup was on Deebo Samuel on 13 plays in the Super Bowl. On those 13 plays, Deebo was targeted 6 times, and McDuffie only allowed 1 catch for 9 yards and had 3 pass breakups. So I think when you have a secondary like Spags had in this game that could execute man coverage at such a high level, you had to play that. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on, we talked about the 49ers being really good against man coverage coming into this game, but do you think that the Chiefs play man coverage in more of a unique and disruptive way that it messed with the 49ers pass game?
I think it might just be that those guys are just flat better. So like when we say blueprint, I know friend of the pod, Shook Body, he loves the word blueprint. And I'm always so hesitant for it because like the Browns, if we say, okay, the blueprint is, pressure inside, like get some hands up there in front of Purdy, like stuff that box and play tight man coverage. Like I love that in theory, but it's so hard to actually do that. Like some of those plays that like even the one in the end zone where McDuffie is like Deebo goes in motion, he ends up going vertical, balls in the air. And like once the ball was thrown, I was like, there's just no shot that McDuffie's not going to knock this down. He's so good in these spots over and over. I think Snead is just like totally playing above his level. I will say like some of their coverage mechanics, like it does feel like they play it like a little bit tighter, but that sometimes feels like it's more on those inside guys and less the cornerbacks. And, I know we've talked about previously, like you get variance at the cornerback position. I mean, I hope it's stable for them. It looks like it can be. Like they showed it, I think, at points last year where, again, they won a Super Bowl last year too. And I'm thinking back to like Spags' first Super Bowl where you get the like, oh, the way to beat Tom Brady is you rush him up the middle. And then it makes you think like, okay, if you're to choose one of between rush and coverage, maybe you choose rush because you can disrupt the quarterback. Well, we gave Spags both because he has Chris Jones and all these guys like Karlaftis playing above his level too. And then such good guys on the outside. It's like, it's almost frustrating because it was so beautiful. It was so well done where there were plays, and we'll talk about a few plays kind of after we go back and forth on this. But yeah, so to long answer to your short question of like, is it something different about the man coverage? I think it's different about the man coverage players. And I think that if we saw a lot of teams try this exact same thing, Ayuk just ends up wide open more times, or like the times that Deebo is kind of gloved up a little bit, he just like is getting into open space. So definitely a tough one, kind of back and forth. Do you want to talk about some other stuff before we talk about some individual plays?
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, I totally agree with you. Like you have to have the players to execute this. It's not like every team would be able to play very high man coverage, very high blitz rate against the 49ers offense. But another thing I think to mention is, so the 49ers came out, and like we expected, they played a lot of 21 personnel with Kyle Juszczyk on the field, and that was matched with base defense oftentimes from the Chiefs. 49ers were really good at 21 personnel. It was something unique that they did the whole season, and they did well out of it. And they had a 49% pass rate when they were in 21 personnel, but they averaged a negative 0.01 EPA per play, because when the Chiefs matched that with base defense, when they came out in a 4-3-4 front, they were able to do that 35% of the time. And the 49ers had a negative 0.31 EPA per play when they had to face base defense. So, I'm really interested to hear what kind of your thoughts were on how the Chiefs were able to play base defense and to be so effective out of it.
A lot of it is, can your guy get off a block? And a lot of times on these run plays, like we talk about, the like perfectly blocked run play is the most beautiful thing on earth and has like the highest EPA. It is really, really hard to get that, right? Like to have guys moving together in motion against someone who is incredibly strong. Thinking Chris Jones is the easiest example, but a lot of times, they had like an extra guy that was kind of lined up on the end, and he was able to manipulate that tight end double team a little bit and stopped anyone from getting to that second level. And then, on the backside of some of those runs, like people were able to kind of cut down there. And then if you have someone on the backside chasing down your outside zone runs, usually the first thing you do off of that is you're going to run kind of that keeper, that boot fake going the opposite direction. And you saw, I think it was like the second play where Juszczyk is able to catch it in the flat and get some yak after that. But Kansas City did a really good job where later on, I think it was Karlaftis, like he holds up the guy who's usually going to be running that route, and then Purdy has nowhere to go. So, and then later on, they ran into Kittle once, and then McDuffie just tackles him after 2 yards. Always so cool you see DBs tackling big tight ends like that. We can't shout out McDuffie enough. So it felt like, when they were getting to some of those just like core answers that you see in every game, like Kansas City was so prepared for that. So it wasn't even just, hey, we're ready to stop the run, but we're able to kind of muck this up in a different direction. And again, I do think Kyle Shanahan overall, like when I was going through the plays, I felt pretty fine with a lot of the play calls. Like we think about, we can start kind of reviewing some of these plays, like the bubble and go, where you get that. I think they probably ran it last week. They ran it as just a bubble later on, where they get a motion across and it becomes like X blocking. So the outside receiver is kind of slamming down on the nickel defender. The inside guy is going out to the cornerback. And on the bubble, when they threw it later in the game, it was a nice gain for Debo, just blocked up really well. On that earlier fake, love the play call. It's a great design, I think. So they have two tight ends, or I think it was two tight ends, maybe just one tight end, a close side to the opposite side, and Kansas City's in a too high look. So that opposite field safety ends up working across. And I don't know, obviously, Ayuk and Purdy, they're not on the same page there. Purdy just kind of throws it as maybe he's anticipating Ayuk to kind of just run through that. Ayuk sees a defender there, so maybe he has to mess with the route a little bit. So that was one. Obviously, Tish, I know you love that double pass. I know we both love, give everyone a chance. We got Juwan Jennings looking off safeties and holding the ball extra on that play particularly. Like if you watch it back, the right guard gets like just enough. I think it was Nick Bolton or like a defender there. So it's always those super little things that are such a big deal. We already talked about that McDuffie PBU where Debo goes off motion. We have to talk about that play where Purdy's faking that kind of outside zone to the right side. You get vertical releases from everyone. It ends up just in a kind of an overthrow to Debo. Do I want to call an overthrow? I'm not sure. Chris Jones is like really ready to kind of smack Purdy in the face there. And if you look back at it, one, that is a really hard assignment for offensive linemen. Like you're kind of run blocking a little bit. This guy can just get vertical on you because he doesn't have to stop the run after he sees the fake. And maybe you could say, all right, well, Purdy, you want him to drop a bit further back. That was just one where it's like in the larger context of things where you just can't have like multiple plays where you got touchdowns kind of drawn up. And we haven't even talked about that last one, but I do want to talk about something, Tej. I know I'm just going on the rant here. There's so many good plays. I'm glad everyone got to watch them all. We're just focusing on one game. So last year the Dolphins did something, and really, teams have been doing this for a bit where, your center's pulling on play action and blocking the defensive end. And San Francisco used that a few times. One time earlier in the game, Kansas City gets a free run through, and then similar protection on that last offensive play for the 49ers where that center is pulling, and you see the right guard and left guard blocking the same player. That ended up being, I think it was Chris Jones who just kind of free runs through that. Obviously always hard to place blame. I think it might have been on the right guard from just in an assignment perspective. But even then, like having that pull protection in that red zone area and Spags having the wherewithal to be obviously a pressure defensive coordinator and sending that blitz, it just makes it really hard on an offense. So it doesn't matter that Ayuk and I think it was Jennings who were kind of wide open there. But you can't protect it. So a lot of things in today's last one, I promise here that McDuffie, it was 3rd and 4 around the 2-minute warning. And then McDuffie ends up blitzing. He's a free runner on the pressure. He ends up kind of batting the Purdy throw away. And then, you watch the clip, like you just look at the center. And we had talked about this previously where San Francisco, they're a set it and forget it protection team. So it's not something where Purdy's going to go up to the line. He sees what's going on with McDuffie. Something funky is going on with the left side. He's going to reset protection. Like it's not that that's a bug. Like that is the feature of how they do their protections. It's really center driven. It's play call driven, of course, too. And the quarterback's not really going to reset, or at least that's not what I've seen on film. So that was an awesome play by McDuffie to make sure he got his hand on the ball. And then just a good job by Spags to understand, look, the center, it's really hard to do that. And if you are able to overload it to one side, particularly away from where Kittle was in the backfield, it's a good way to take advantage of a team that they're going to be set it and forget it protections. All right, Tej, I got all those plays. I wanted to make sure I got all those plays on the record, get them off my chest. It was really fun film to go through. What do you got? Some of your thoughts there, or kind of anything else you want to talk about on this side?
I am totally with you on like Purdy playing pretty well in this game. Like I thought that he definitely was a player that showed that he was again able to handle blitz looks when thrown at him. Well, I think it really came down to whether you want to place some of the blame on Shanahan in particular, Purdy for not adjusting protection, the offensive line maybe for not adjusting protection. Like it's without being actually there, it's hard to know exactly who to put the blame on, but like allowing Chris Jones to have 3 quick pressures and 6 total pressures is not something you want to have happen, obviously, in a game where it's like pressures are fine. Like they're going to happen throughout the game. I think that the protection, whether it was on whoever was deciding the protection rules on these specific plays, should have done a better job of making sure that Chris Jones wasn't having some of these unblocked pressures or quick pressures where it was easy for him to disrupt the plays, because he saved possibly multiple touchdowns off of that. But overall, Purdy did have a good game, finished with 8.2 total EPA, despite the run game having a 10th percentile EPA per rush, in large part because of Christian McCaffrey's first fumble on the first drive there. So I think the other issue for the 49ers offense in this game was they weren't able to convert enough late downs. That's often when we saw the blitz get dialed up, or Spags kind of be in his bag for what he was throwing out them. But it was also stemming from some early down issues where they had a 9.1 average yards to go on third down, which is 8th percentile. You look at their third down or late down conversion rate in general, and it was only 35.7%, which was the 22nd percentile performance. So the play I really come back to, though, is one of those late down plays that impacted the game late in the fourth quarter. If the 49ers were, in a situation to go up 3, and it was 3rd and 4, and the Chiefs defense came out in a 2-2-7 front or formation where they had 2 defensive linemen, 2 linebackers, and 7 defensive backs. They sent a blitz, got an unblocked pressure, and it was an incomplete pass very quickly. 49ers kicked the field goal, and that ended up leading to the overtime. So, can you take us through what you were seeing on that play, how unique it was for a 2-2-7 formation to come out, with only 2 defensive linemen on the field on a 3rd and 4?
Yeah, that plays the McDuffie like bat down, right?
Yes, McDuffie bat down.
Yeah. Talked about that as the kind of last one there. It's weird. I think Kansas City ran it like once or twice the rest of the way. I think on that play, like as the Kittle's in the backfield, they kind of it looks like, is it like 6-man protection? Like they're able to keep that Kittle in there, and then Kansas City, I think a linebacker lined up over, like away from what is essentially the running back in the backfield. And I was thinking about, it's like, when you look at it, like McDuffie kind of backpedals off a little bit before he comes, but as I said, the big thing there is like it's set and forget of protection. It's really hard for the center to be able to do it. And then to me, like I always have a hard time with this. It's like, all right, well, like, do you blame the center? I don't know, probably not. Like I think his protection call was fine, but like if your rules are your rules, the defense is going to know how to break him. And then, it's on you. Are you able to, whatever, like get a guy jumping and make him miss? Like the defense is going to be able to get a free runner. If you block with 10 people, they can send 11, right? Like they're always going to be able to, just from a math perspective, be able to do that. And, as you mentioned, like Purdy, it's another thing I have a hard time with. Like, yeah, I think he did a lot of things well. I wonder, I think Kansas City, it feels like in the post-game press conference, they made it very clear. It's like, all right, well, we're going to play this game and we're going to like make Purdy beat us, right? It's always easy for you to say, all right, well, we want to make a specific player beat him. And they really did just challenge the heck out of them. They, as I said, stuff the boxes in the run game, just try and, get that interior pressure, make things kind of mucky for Purdy in a little bit of a way. And I am curious to see like what, does the pass game look different a little bit next year, whether it's, sometimes there's parts of the pass game where, it does really benefit them to be against zone coverage. And a lot of it is, built to kind of stretch out those zones and make things kind of difficult in that way. I'm glad you mentioned those late downs. Obviously, whenever you have your third down success rate kind of at a really low spot, it is tough. But so I feel like I keep going back and forth on my head. Like Purdy played well, he didn't do these things well. Shanahan called a good game. Maybe this could have been better. I'm glad you mentioned the luck factor. We will talk about that. We will definitely talk about that. And I'll ask you a question about it. Does any of it matter if we're just going to get all these kind of funky bounces of football? Tej, you good to transition over to Kansas City offense versus San Francisco defense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's talk about that.
All right. I took the air out of the room on the San Francisco offense versus Kansas City defense. So I'll let you lead off here talking a little bit about Kansas City's offense versus San Francisco's defense.
So I saw the Chiefs offense, 49ers defense as like really just the tale of two halves, where in the first half, the Chiefs had a negative 0.23 EPA per play and a 40% success rate on offense. Second half in overtime, 0.09 EPA per play, 46.2% success rate on offense. I really thought that because of having the extended halftime in this game and just what we've seen from Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes in the past, that the Chiefs were going to come out and, despite all of their first half offensive struggles, put together a pretty good second half. And that really came all on the pass game, where they were not having any success running the ball, especially when they were running up the middle. And they really had to go into their pass game, especially after Dre Greenlaw's unfortunate injury, where they were able to have success passing over the middle of the field and getting Kelce involved in the game. Kelce only had one target in the first half, and it was for negative 0.5 EPA. It was a blown up screen, if I remember correctly. Second half, Kelce had 9 targets and had 5 total EPA when targeted. Marquez Valdes-Scantling had 5 targets in the second half. Rashee Rice stepped up, had 4 targets for 0.7 total EPA. You think about that big third down conversion on the Chiefs drive when the 49ers were blitzing towards the end of the game, that really helped that. And then Isaiah Pacheco, against all the zone that the 49ers were playing, was also to get the 6 total targets and 6 receptions throughout the game, like we talked about on the preview show. So it was really all of that in the second half, where it was Reed and Mahomes figuring out what they were seeing from the 49ers defense and from Steve Wilks, who came in with a good game plan in the first half. It was Dre Greenlaw going down and Burks coming in to replace him, and Burks having a very big drop off from Greenlaw. And then it was just Kelce, Rice getting more involved in the second half for the Chiefs pass game to really convert so many of those late downs and to keep them, in the game up until the point where they were able to take the lead in overtime.
Dre Greenlaw, that was, I mean, he was so all over the place to start the game, just like literally flying around. And also just from an overall perspective from both of these defenses, and just obviously every game is physical, but it really felt like these guys were moving at 1.5 speed. They were hitting at 1.5x power. Like it was really just like so intense. And to see Greenlaw go down like that was such a bummer. And I think obviously, that does have an effect on the defense overall. I like that you mentioned those interior runs. I was, I guess, a little bit surprised. I think we both talked about last week about, like Kansas City wants to, win in between in between the tackles, but even in between the guards, like about how they want to get inside. We didn't see as much of that outside running maybe that we would have expected. We did get a few really, really nice clips where like Creed Humphrey is cutting off Fred Warner. And like whenever you see a center kind of running out into space, like that is so sweet. They didn't really challenge Travaris Ward at all, which I think that was a good idea. There's no need to. And I like that you mentioned in the second half, you start challenging that linebacker away from Fred Warner, get Kelce on some of those kind of option routes or even if it's just a flat outbreaker, that is a really good thing. And then in the second half, Kansas City, they seemed like they kind of went back to isolating Travis Kelce on the backside of that 3-by-1 formation a bunch. And then it was really cool. The 49ers, they had, Fred Warner press on him and safety kind of over the top. And I'm not sure if it was like hard. I don't think it was like a hard double team where, hey, these two guys are directly here, but the safety was usually at least dropping down kind of as a robber. And I think on the Mahomes interception, that was kind of one of those plays. But Kelce even looked a little bit open there. Maybe the ball just kind of went over his head. I mean, this is another one where it's so hard, Taylor's like, do we chalk it up to, obviously the punt we'll talk about, the ball bounce is weird, but I was a little bit, down on, I think, the play calling in the first half, and it felt a little bit like in the second half that Mahomes like, you know what, like I'm not going out of here without another ring.
I mean, I'm with you. I thought that Andy Reid, for everything good that he ended up doing later in this game, like was pretty bad in the first half, play calling wise. Like we talked so much about how you challenge the 49ers run defense outside. And when I looked at the run gap breakdown for this game, the Chiefs only ran 4 of those rushes outside the tackles. They had 100% success rate on those 4 rushes. When they ran inside, between the guard and the tackle, depending on whatever gaps you're looking at there, they did that 12 times for a 33% success rate. So it's just like the lack of outside rushes in this game was something that they probably should have done more. Ended up not really mattering at the end there. But then the other thing I think that they did good, coming back onto that is, after the Greenlaw injury, just like the big drop off between Greenlaw and Burks was they were able to put more tight ends onto the field and really take advantage of that linebacker core. When the Chiefs were in 11 personnel, so when only Kelce was on the field, they had a negative 0.09 EPA per play. So not good out of 11 personnel. When they were in 12 personnel, which they ran 25% of the time, so in 20 plays in this game, they had a 0.12 EPA per play, and they had the same pass rate when they were in 11 and 12. So they're still able to pass well out of 12 personnel. And then they use some 13 personnel, in special situations. They use that 11% of the time for a 0.06 EPA per play. So they weren't good when they only had one running back, one tight end out on the field. But as they added tight ends, they were able to find success in this game because of linebacker injuries or just maybe how the 49ers defense was playing them in general with the heavy zone coverage.
Yeah, of course, there is, who, like, do we blame anyone? Obviously, as you said, it kind of doesn't matter. Like, you win the game, you win the game. And unfortunately, that's what we'll be telling everyone about in the future, and probably less about who was calling the plays. I'm not even sure if Andy Reid does call the plays. And as you said, on those outside runs, like their first play coming out of the second half, they get that pitch out to Pacheco. It kind of hits off his hands a little bit, hits the ground. Or I think the pitch was actually behind him probably. But, sometimes as a play caller, I imagine, you see a play not work and then you kind of scrap it. There's only so many plays you can call in a game. But I mean, there were a lot of fun plays, at least to go through. I think that the Mahomes rocket to Hardman, where he's rolling left, you sell that corner, break back to the post. That was Hardman, right, Tej? I'm remembering that correctly.
I believe so.
Yeah, that big catch. The backside safety, he's running to it and he's in a fine spot. And I don't know if he lost track of it, or it was there's just no way this ball's gonna get here, and then it becomes this 50-yard handoff. Obviously, the 49ers force a fumble on the next play, but that was a pretty sick one. 2 minutes left. I think you kind of mentioned this. 3rd and 9 with Mahomes. Bosa's kind of running the edge, and he gets past the tackle, but I think he ends up getting knocked down to a knee, and he's trying to recover. And I think he's at a decent point there, but Mahomes, without even we could probably do it with his eyes closed at this point, steps up, steps out. Really hard to get your defensive end in that boxing mentality kind of constantly against a quarterback. And I think against a lot of quarterbacks, this is a sack, but Mahomes just totally magic. And then the player that was defending the receiver that ends up catching it just steps up for one step, and then you get it. And I like you mentioned, with Greenlaw out, that touchdown after that punt fumble, the Chiefs run this nice little just switch release verticals, get the running back in the flat, safety ends up coming downhill. There's just some sort of communication error. I don't know, whoever it is, whether it's the safety in the corner expecting someone to be there, whether they want the linebacker to be further there, expose or attack the players who are not Fred Warner. I think that is a good choice. But then even finding ways to attack Fred Warner or attack what the defense is doing to you. There's a first down later in the game where they go empty. Kelsey's in the slot. Warner jams him and kind of throws Kelsey to the floor. And then a third down on that same drive, I think it was just literally 2 plays later. That's when you get Kelsey kind of running that underneath route, kind of just cause some sort of traffic, give a little bit of a stutter outside. Warner has to cover the whole entire field. And then if you have the safety to the same side of as Warner dropping down there, as opposed to maybe the opposite side safety, there's really no one that's in that space, unfortunately, that is there to help. And then you get the next play where I think it was the next play, maybe 2 plays after, where Warner just gloves up on Kelsey on that isolation fade, which was really cool. There was 2 or kind of, I guess, 3 plays that we have to talk about where it's the 4th and 1 of overtime and then they also ran pretty much both of the nice Mahomes runs, where the first time it feels like it's an RPO because it's okay, we're running to the left. We got a player going in the flat on the right side. And, the way you can sometimes, at least from an outside view, think about the difference is the offensive line is working up to the second level. That's usually not going to be play action protection. This is likely an RPO. And he just keeps it. I don't even think that's really part of the read. I think it's, either handoff or throw it, but he's no way. I'm taking this one myself. And then that 4th and 1 in overtime, where that to me felt more like a play action because the line is just blocking kind of flat down the line. No one's getting to the second level. And I think that's just a boot, a regular kind of boot play. And you can only run that, or you should run that, when a defensive end is crashing down. Nick Bosa makes a play earlier in the game on a run where he's crashing down hard and he's able to tackle it from the backside. If Bosa is working straight up field, we're absolutely talking about oh, why would you call that play on 4th and 1? You left Bosa unblocked. Literally, you're leaving the best pass rusher unblocked, but you've seen him do that over and over. And then Mahomes takes that. And then the last play, the touchdown, obviously get that, that in motion, breaking back out, change that number count. I think that I think it may have been one of the players, they said, that is technically an RPO. It does look a little bit like that, where, the right side of the offensive line is getting to the second level. I don't think there's any chance ever that Mahomes was going to actually hand that off, whatever the play design was. So to me, on this side, it felt a little bit less on the opposite side, where you could point to, well, this kind of protection was an issue. It just felt a little bit more like a collection of individual plays for Kansas City that just ends up working out when you have Patrick Mahomes doing it.
That's a really good info that they noticed Bosa crashing down on those similar plays, and then they knew that putting Mahomes out on a boot would work. Like, you think about the alternate reality where Bosa doesn't crash down, like you mentioned, and there would have been a lot of discourse related to that. And yeah, I mean, I think it's a good understanding of like when you look at Mahomes as a whole in this game, like one of the things that I was praising Bosa throughout the game. I think the announcers were also saying the same thing, was like Bosa did a really good job of creating pressures while also staying in his pass lane a lot throughout the game. And I think both of the Chiefs tackles in this game were letting up a lot of pressure, and Mahomes wasn't able to do his usual scrambles outside of it just because they were getting pushed back more instead of getting pushed inside, which I think was really interesting. And again, like you look at Mahomes from a big picture standpoint, in this Super Bowl in particular, where the Chiefs offense had a ninth percentile EPA per rush. They were letting up pressures at a pretty high rate. Creed Humphrey, for as good as a blocker as he was snapping it very low to Mahomes frequently throughout the game. And, even, the play with 10 seconds to go right before the end of regulation, Mahomes maybe would have got time to look at Rishi Rice, for the touchdown there, but the snap was so low he had to pick it up and just throw it to Kelsey, where it resulted in incomplete pass. Like all of these things together made this a very difficult job for Mahomes to pull off. You think about how his leading pass catchers in this game were Justin Watson, McCole Hardman for large portions of it. Like just everything together, I think was just such an impressive performance from Patrick Mahomes. Like personally, I would have given Super Bowl MVP to Trent McDuffie. Just because I thought that would have been really cool to recognize his defensive greatness. But like I can totally see why they gave it to Mahomes. Just being the team's leading passer, obviously, and their leading rusher was a very impressive performance that he put together. And it was just like another thing that he's notched in his already very impressive career at age 28. Which you corrected me on on Sunday night when I thought he was 29.
Yeah, come on, Tish. Get the years right. And you got to respect the kickers too. Like, should Harrison Butker been the MVP?
Yeah.
And I feel like I've said this a million times in this podcast, where it's like the narrative that comes away from it. It's like, oh, like we can't give credit to every single person that did something good in this game, or to like every single thing that was one way or the other. And then I do think it's important to recognize, like, there are so many universes where the 49ers win this game. It was obviously, as I said, like first 4 possessions, you get 3 points there. That is really, really rough. And partially that is, of course, to credit the Chiefs defense in a lot of ways. But, we call it stats and scheme. Should we call it stats and scheme and luck or something, or the way the ball bounces? I do think we need to at least talk about, or at least mention, 7 fumbles in this game. 1 gets recovered by San Francisco. Like that is the punt that so unfortunately hit off the 49ers player, like literally like the side of his heel is such a bummer. You get that missed extra point. Kansas City punter was, I think, good for really a lot of the game. And obviously, special teams, like that is something that's super important and like has to be coached. And like, good special teams units are good special teams units. Like the Kansas City holder on that 57-yarder, like that's a really, really hard play to make. But like 7 fumbles, 1 goes San Francisco's way. Like how do we take that into account, Tage? Like, do we just stop recording the podcast and just like we just do an analysis of like, okay, well, these are like the maybe luck is the wrong word, but like this is a bounce of the ball that went in one team's favor. This team is gonna win in this situation. Tej, how do I deal with this?
Yeah, I mean, it is a great question to bring up, and my friend Kevin Cole put together a really cool table on the most impactful plays of the game. So when you do look at it, it is just like these fumbles that created this big disparity in what happened in this game. The punt return fumble on the 49ers side of things was a 22.3% swing in win probability, which was the most of the entire game. When you look at Christian McCaffrey's fumble, that was a 15.9% swing in win probability, which was the 3rd most behind the Isaiah Pacheco fumble. So the fumbles played a huge role in this game. Those were fumbles that switched sides, that switched teams that were recovering that. You also have all the Chiefs fumbles that they ended up recovering in this game. So, I think that like fans of teams, will often get upset when you mention that luck played a role in them winning the game. And, I think that obviously the Chiefs put themselves in a situation to win this game with a little bit of luck going their way. And when you look at like a post-game adjusted score afterward, or you even look at the success rate of the two teams from this game, it's very, very close. Like it was really a coin flip game, and that obviously played out as it went into overtime. But the Chiefs' fumble luck in this game definitely swung towards their side, where this could just be considered regression to the mean from all of the bad luck that happened with drops and penalties throughout the season that ended up kind of getting reversed in the playoffs for them as they went towards winning, the Super Bowl here.
Yeah, I like to think that neither of these teams were undeserving of winning. Obviously, can only be one winner. And like I said, I hesitate with the word luck. Like, you can coach on special teams that, you say whatever your word is to like make sure that your gunner defender is just like run straight to the sidelines if the punt is short. And like fumble recovery is I think at least a skill a little bit away. Like obviously, you can't predict the bounce of the ball, but I think that that is something that you can train. It's just always so funny that like I think you do too. Like I take this game like so seriously and like really care about it and like want to learn more about it, and then just to have literally sometimes like the inches bounce of a ball really be such a big factor. Now I wanted to make sure that we didn't start with this segment. We did that part third because I do think obviously all the things that happened on the offense and defense and special teams for both teams were what got you there. And I'm glad that you mentioned, you have to put yourself in an advantage or put yourself in a situation to be able to take advantage of that ball, bouncing in your way. Like Kansas City fumbles after that big play. Then, on the opposite side, and Kansas City gets a fumble. They have a play fired up right away that's able to take advantage of Fred Warner or of the Drake Greenlaw not being there. All right, Tish. So I'm just gonna continue to do this job and not just chalk it up to luck. But I think another thing we got to talk about is the new overtime rules. I think this is a fun one because I do think it's very close in terms of should you take the ball first, should you take the ball second, how should you handle that? Again, like I said, to me it is very close. I don't think either of us are gonna say, or maybe you could say, Tish, I don't know. I don't think either of us are gonna say, it is so definitive, like you're ridiculous if you do it one way or the other. I think I lean a little bit closer to taking the ball second, really for that information advantage. If you are the first team, is it something where you don't play for all 4 downs? It would be lovely, Tage, if we could just have all teams play for all 4 downs, but obviously we don't live in that situation. And I do think, if you're the second mover in that situation, you can say, we're going to go for 2 at the end and just win it. So where if your argument for receiving the ball first is we're going to have the ball first in the sudden death situation if both of us match, so that third possession, to me, if you're the second mover, you can just kind of erase that as a whole. Now, I do think in this particular situation, there is, and I think, in everything when we talk about this stuff, there is like the human element in the sense that I think both defenses were just like absolutely gassed. So I don't have like too much of an objection for Shanahan saying, all right, well, I think that, we can continue to press this defense. We can go score. We need our defense to be able to just rest like just a little bit. So for me, again, like I think it's like a toss up. It didn't feel like, it's morally objectionable either way. I think I would have preferred maybe the opposite decision, but I don't think this is a case where this decision decided the game. I don't want to go as far as saying that, but Tej, why don't you take us through a little bit of your thoughts on kind of maybe what you would have done and your evaluation of the situation of either taking the ball first, you win the toss, maybe you kick it off to start overtime.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on so many good points there that I think are worth mentioning. So I'm glad that you brought those up. So I've thought about this a lot, since the Super Bowl, or I guess even since the rule came out. Really cool, by the way, that we got to see the new playoff overtime tested out in the Super Bowl. A couple things I'll say on it is it's way too early into the rule to be confident on either side of the ball. And then the other thing is if you built a simulation out of using these new overtime rules, which I've seen a couple really smart people do, it depends on what your assumptions are. So if you're using average offenses versus average defenses, I don't think there'll be an advantage on either side. Just because I think, like you mentioned, it's the trade-off between the information second mover advantage versus getting the ball third if it comes to that, and having the opportunity to score. As you move closer towards the offenses having the advantage, I think it also moves the advantage towards whoever gets the ball second because they have the 4 downs to work with. So if you have a game where it's a defensive battle, it's 10-10 entering overtime, there's probably an advantage to going first. if you have a game where you feel confident about both offenses and their ability to score, which you're often going to see in the playoffs because usually the better offenses make the playoffs and play in these games. I think that slightly moves the advantage to going second. When you're playing against Patrick Mahomes and someone who has this ability to basically always get to the spot that he needs to get, whether it's to get a field goal if they need a field goal, to get a touchdown if they need a touchdown, I think that definitely pushes a little bit of a stronger lead to going second, because you don't want to give him 4 downs to work with. And then the Chiefs offense has complete control over whether they want that third possession to happen, because if both teams scored a touchdown on their opening drives, the Chiefs offense would have gone for 2. Like they would have ended the game one way or another after scoring their touchdown. They could go for 4th downs, up until whatever distance they wanted to avoid matching the 49ers field goal. So like if it was 4th and 8, they were in 50-50 field goal range, like I could have seen them going for it, just because they wouldn't have wanted the 49ers to get the ball with that third advantage there. So you have to think about the likelihood that both teams get a field goal or both teams punt, and if that chance is worth not having the information advantage, not having 4 downs to work with. So I think it's great that we're going to have this new playoff overtime again, just because of like low sample. Like we probably won't have a good answer or a good idea of like which side will win this for a long time. I think that and like maybe ever, like just because of how they are experimenting with different overtime types. The question I wanted to bring up with you though is, so my friend Matt Weiss, when he was at the Ravens, he proposed a different overtime called spot and choose, where whoever wins the coin toss gets to choose which yard line they want to put the ball on. And then the team that didn't win the coin toss gets to choose whether they want to play offense or defense based on that. And then it would have been the sudden death situation where if you score a touchdown, you win. If you kick a field goal, the other team gets a chance. So if you were San Francisco and you did win the coin toss, do you have an idea for what yard line you would have put the ball on in the spot and choose situation?
This is great, and I love the idea of spot and choose. Can you, let's say theoretically, and we're just making this up, obviously spot and choose is not used in the NFL. Can you like defer the yard line placement and just say we'll take the ball no matter where you put it? Obviously, the other team would put the ball at the 1 yard line. Like, is that, because I feel like both teams' offenses probably, like if you're Andy Reid, you say, okay, well, I have Patrick Mahomes. If you're Kyle Shanahan, you say that you have this buzzsaw offense. I'm trying to think, like if you put it within the 5, like this Kansas City, just say that they'll go ahead and play offense. But obviously, like if we if are we, I guess the hard thing is then, is it still like the same overtime rules? Like to me, I think spot and choose is a little bit better in sudden death, where let's
Yeah.
why don't we do that? Because if it is sudden
death, that's what the rule would be, where it's like
okay,
if you score a touchdown on offense, you win. Like it's the old overtime rules, right? You score a touchdown on offense, you win. You kick a field goal, you punt, and the other team still gets a chance.
I think you got to put it at like the 5. Like I don't know, maybe I think a little bit longer about it. But even if you put it at the 5, if you're Kansas City, why wouldn't you just take the ball? Like go ahead and do it. It almost feel like it feels like it doesn't
I think
matter
if I'm
where
Kansas City, I would take defense if it was at the 5, just because like I feel like when you're backed up like that in your own end zone, it would be tight. I think for me, like if I'm playing Kansas City here, the 7 or 8 is probably where my break even point is. I guess that's just a couple of yards. Like it is a very tough decision for sure.
Yeah, and like, but I can tell you, we've done like 24 of these shows, and like every single time it's like whatever the decision is, like, can you isolate it in a vacuum and say, you know what, like that was reasonable, and then whatever the results are, it's like, okay, well now Seth on the opener for whatever show, like, oh, I cannot believe that this guy chose to play defense first. if you're the head coach, that is always, oh yeah, that's a fun one, and obviously we'll see if there are rule changes. Maybe when the new NCAA video game comes out, we'll just we'll set our own overtime rules for that stuff. Kind of just thinking about some closing thoughts. Like it is so Well, because I think I keep thinking about it in the context of my nephews. Like, what am I going to tell them about this game when obviously I think the oldest one will have a little bit of a memory. He is 5, for those of you wondering at home, confirming from last week's end of last week's episode. As I said, I did want to say I said that in the mic last episode, but like the 49ers offense this season was so incredible. Like the word Death Star, I hope maybe we won't use it next year because it's so properly applied to this team. The Ravens team was such a buzzsaw. They're like Lamar played out of his mind, did win another MVP. Mike McDonald's defense was so special this year, and obviously, that whole entire staff gets taken away in so many different ways to other teams. The Lions have like the dream season, and all of that is just like really erased. Like Tish, in 5 years, like I don't know, like I don't think we talk about that. I'm thinking about 5 years back. Like you usually just think about who won that. So it is so wild from a narrative perspective. Just like Patrick Mahomes, just obviously, I mean, what he's done to the Bills, particularly in terms of kind of winning there, but just how many like other really fun, exciting storylines that we love to talk about through the year, just like unfortunately get pushed to the wayside when you have Mahomes, who's just so inevitable.
That's why I thought that this Super Bowl run was very important for Mahomes, because you really saw, and I bet if you asked him, this would be his favorite of the three that he's won, because you saw everything from the Chiefs' perspective this season. I mean, there was a Christmas Day game against the Raiders where their offense looked completely hopeless. But again, when you work with the prior that the Chiefs came into the season with, you looked on sumersports.com, you saw the ELO ratings. The Chiefs never really wavered outside of the top 3 because they had such a strong prior, and because we've seen them become more unique on offense in the playoffs before. We've seen their defense often improve as the season got later. They had a young defense this year. And again, it became a very good defense, especially at the end of the year, but throughout the year. Like this one was so important for the Chiefs to win, because it shows that they can really have the regular season as an experimentation time, as a time to find out who your best pass catches were, how, Kelsey's lower usage versus, Rashee Rice's increasing usage. And then you saw that kind of combine in the second half of this game. Like all that stuff together, I think was really important for the Chiefs to know that they have in their back pocket if they ever go through a time again where they go on a mini losing streak, or their offense looks like it's stalling out, or different things like that can pop up throughout a season. For the 49ers, next year is the year for them to actually come through and win the Super Bowl. Like you look at some of the cap hits that they're going to have the year after that. Trent Williams is up there in age, like maybe a possible retirement after next season is on the table. You're going to have to pay Ayuk. You're going to have to pay, Purdy eventually. Like there's going to be a lot of decisions for them to make. And their front office is so good at putting together pieces and finding unique ways to get value. Like no one saw the Hargrave signing, in free agency, and they go out and do that to bolster their pass rush. So I think when you look at all that combined, like they are favorites on both in our simulations and in the betting market for a reason next year. Like NFC is easier. They're still such a good team, and they're favored in every single game this year for a reason. But it'll just be interesting to see, like you brought up, like what's the next iteration of how they can keep this edge going. Like what's Shanahan going to do on offense? What is the defense kind of going to get from the draft or from free agency to kind of bolster some of the shortcomings that they had there? Like that, I'm very curious to see how that plays out.
Yeah, man. I mean, I'm glad you mentioned Ayuk specifically. Like in this game, he like really is able to eat up man coverage. I thought Kansas City, it wasn't like they were always like double teaming him. I think that they like showed multiple people over him in different ways to maybe dissuade Purdy from looking that way a bit. Tej, I mean, we're getting into the offseason talk. It's going to be time to move off of the Google Doc that we're on and onto another Google Doc. Do you have any kind of final words before we wrap for the still 2023 season?
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciated, first of all, you for doing this with me this entire season and keeping us so organized on the Google Doc. But like everyone also out there who listened, like it was really nice to hear feedback throughout the season. Again, like the Chiefs, I thought we started a little bit slow, but hopefully improved towards the end of the year. But also just when people would text me about different things that we said or different concepts that they like that you brought up or when we would explain stats and stuff. Like it was really wholesome to hear people say that type of stuff. So, it was awesome to do this show this season. I think we're going to take next week off, but then have some off-season topics that we'll talk about. That'll be really fun.
Yeah, really what was a special season, Tejan. And just like, I'm really glad that we got to share it together. I feel like I learned a lot. And I feel like, the people that listen, they sent in stuff that really, I think, helped both of us. So thank you everyone for listening to another episode of Stats and Scheme. Again, the last one on the 2023 Google Doc. Don't worry though, the 2024 Google Doc is live. We're going to, like Tej said, we're going to take next week off. And then we'll come back right after that. I think what we're going to do is we'll kind of just take like specific topics. I feel like we did this a bunch through the year where it's like, maybe in the off season, we'll talk about pressure to sack rate and, kind of break the topic down a little bit. Like particularly, I think we'll probably lead with a lot of the stats as we get into kind of, team building and the draft and the off season, and kind of do that, keep on our usual kind of Tuesday tempo. So stay tuned for what is next on the feed. Got some exciting stuff going on in some other spots on the Sumer Sports Show podcast feed. But most importantly, everyone, enjoy the rest of your week, and we will see you next time.